Hello, my name is Lawrence Rosenthal, the rabbi for Ahavath Achim Synagogue in Atlanta, Georgia. I am so honored to be here tonight welcoming you to this incredible lecture with President Herzog, the President of Israel. Welcome, Mr. President, and we are honored to have you as this year's speaker for the Fran Eizenstat and the Eizenstat Family Lecture. I am grateful to Ambassador Eizenstat and his family for their generosity and hard work putting together this lecture each and every year. I would like to also extend my gratitude to Miss Marilyn Ginsberg Eckstein for her generosity, endowing the Marilyn Ginsberg Eckstein Cultural Arts Program at Ahavath Achim Synagogue, which supports this lecture and so many of the arts at our synagogue for our community. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our synagogue lay leadership, led by our president, Mark Stern, and our synagogue staff for all their work ensuring tonight's presentation was able to happen. This week, in our spiritual journey, we walk with our matriarch Sarah as the promise of God is fulfilled at the beginning of this week's Torah reading, Parshat Vayera, Genesis chapter 21. Towards the end of a long life, she has her first child, Isaac, and with her strength and with his birth, the Jewish people, as an eternal people, is finally realized. Judaism, as a people, begins. This is an amazing detail, which is often overlooked. The rest of the Parsha contains two of the most iconic and spiritually monumental moments of the Jewish people. The banishment of Hagar and Ishmael, which is followed closely with the Akedah story, the binding of Isaac. It is no wonder that two of the two Torah readings for the grand high holiday Rosh Hashanah come from this Torah portion. And as I said, spiritually, the reverberations from these two stories continues to shake and rattle us as a spiritual people. That is probably why we miss the very beginning of this reading, the birth of Isaac, the miraculous fulfillment of a simple promise, and a moment which is above all the most monumental. Without Isaac's life, the rest of the stories are irrelevant. And that brings us to this moment, the moment we are in right now. I am always excited to hear the thoughts and wisdom of our Eizenstat lecturer. And tonight, hearing from President Herzog, after the last 13 months of war, I am so interested in hearing his opinion of all the stories, all the moments of our time that he has witnessed, that he has been a part of. But as the Parsha tells us so beautifully and quietly in its opening words, that all the moments, all the stories, all the key diplomatic decisions that lead to either a new peace or a new war, all pale in comparison to the very fact of our lives and that we get to live in this important moment. It's a reminder of the attitude we must bring and the wonderment we should bring to this discussion. I thank you for being here, for being alive, and for being part of the incredible life and stories that we all share and live together.
Welcome to the 35th Annual Fran Eizenstat and Eizenstat Family Memorial Lecture hosted by the Ahavath Achim Synagogue in Atlanta. Special thanks to Rabbi Lawrence Rosenthal and Executive Director Barry Herman, and to President Herzog's superb staff led by Dikla Scheinfeld. My wonderful late wife, Fran, would be especially proud of our speaker this year, Israeli President Isaac Herzog, affectionately known as Bougie. Fran was a true Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. She was a leader of the Jewish and general communities in Atlanta, Washington, and nationally, making life better for the disadvantaged of all religions, colors, and backgrounds. But Fran had a special connection with Israel. She studied there in her junior semester at Brandeis. She took our two boys, Jay and Brian, for extended summers in Israel, which led them to study in Israel later. And she served on the board of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. Israel's 11th president honors her memory and that of my parents and my aunt and uncle by fitting us into his very busy schedule at a momentous time in Israel's history. President Herzog was the leader of the Labor Party, a member of the Knesset, minister in several governments, and head of the Jewish Agency. He was elected president by the Knesset with more votes than any previous president in Israel's history. He comes from a distinguished Israeli family. His father, Chaim Herzog, was Israel's sixth president. His grandfather was Israel's chief rabbi. His uncle was the famous Israeli ambassador and foreign minister Abba Eban. And his brother, Michael, is currently Israeli ambassador to the United States. Welcome and thank you, President Herzog. You honor us by your presence.
Thank you, Stu. It's an honor and a pleasure. And it's a special honor to honor the Eizenstat family, especially your late wife's Fran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You come, as I mentioned, from a very long line of key figures in Israeli and Jewish public life. How does this heritage influence your own public service?
Yeah, I can add more and more to the list. One of them was my father, and uncle of my father was the head of the AFL-CIO. His name was Sidney Hillman, and FDR could not get the New Deal on without him. So I have a long list in my family, and it clearly, seriously impacted my life, impacted my feeling of my own destiny as a human being. It was clear to me from early childhood that I serve and that I live in a family that is serving the nation of Israel, and it comes back to me quite often. And it gives me some perspective, because there are very difficult moments. The last year that we've gone through has been one of the worst in Israel's history. And I'm often thinking about my late grandfather, who had to rescue Jewish children in the Holocaust, and my late father, who saw Israel at its creation. So it gives me a perspective that I know that I'm continuing in the legacy as well.
October 7th obviously was a watershed in Israeli and in Jewish history, the biggest single massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And how has that impacted Israeli society, especially the diversity and the feelings between different communities, but also psychologically in terms of Israeli public's feeling of safety?
That's a big question. We've gone through an extremely challenging time, difficult moments, painful moments. I'll say from my own experience. Me and my wife, we've met about 1,000 bereaving families in the past year of all facets of life, all backgrounds, all religions, all beliefs, the incredible tapestry of our nation. And of course, when you look at it from a bird's eye view, the nation is tormented. The nation is agonizing. The nation at first was in utter trauma and shock. Now it's shown immense resilience. It rose up like a lion, as the Bible says. But truly, we're all human beings. We're all flesh and blood, and especially souls. And it is extremely painful and challenging. And that's why there will be a lot of effects to this situation. First of all, there are many debates within Israeli society about the future of our life with our neighbors. Within Israeli society, incidentally, I'm quite impressed by the fact that all parts of Israeli society have, immediately come forward and showed immense solidarity, immense support for each other. Where I will never forget, going into the emergency room in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba on the second day of the war, hundreds of wounded people, terrible tragedies, huge pain, but you saw all facets of, doctors and nurses and staff and people, Muslims and Jews, Bedouins in the Negev, and people from all over the country, ultra-Orthodox, and non-religious Israelis, and they're all there just working hard to save life. And it happened all throughout this year, and I see an immense strength within our nation. There will be major questions asked. Can we trust any partner? can we trust any neighbor? It's a legitimate question. And whoever judges us according to a compass from far away has to understand that this is impacting our lives. There will be a huge challenge in terms of the post-traumatic effect on human beings. Many people will suffer from PTSD. I'm thinking to myself, as the President of Israel, when I'm walking here or traveling now in New York, and I hear a siren of police, all of a sudden I kind of stop for a second. Imagine, because I'm used to sirens in Israel now. So if it's me, then the entire population has gone and is going through this. So I would say in conclusion that we're only in the beginning of the impacts of this war on our nation.
But I understand also that so many Israelis have risen to the occasion. For example, I have friends and relatives who have pitched in to harvest crops while the farmers who would have done so are in the reserves fighting, and that it's brought the society together in many ways.
It's true. Absolutely true. And I'm very proud of my nation. The fact is that you have people 40-year-olds, 50 years old, or it doesn't matter, any other age, all the way up to 96, going and serving in the army, putting on their uniform and serving 3-4 times. You have people who haven't been at least, perhaps 1 month going back to their ordinary life and going again to the battlefront. It's amazing. People don't say no to a call of duty. And the mobilization of civil society has been immense and extremely powerful. We've seen the academic institution, the life-saving institutions, all facets of society simply rising and doing whatever they have to do and helping each other. And this is very, very impressive. Last week, I honored civilians who have showed valor and bravery, courage, with a Medal of Honor. Bravery on 7th of October. It included people from all corners of the country, from different religious backgrounds, who went and saved life where they risked their own lives time and time again, and even children, even small children, even toddlers, who I honored with a Medal of Valor and Bravery, because they showed immense courage. And you say to yourself, I wish the world would zoom in, not on the negative, but I wish they could see the beauty of our nation, which did not seek this war, did not want this war. This war was coerced upon us, was forced upon us. But once we were called to it, we are fighting, and we're fighting hard, and we are indeed defending the values of the free world.
Why do you believe that so many Arab states decided to normalize relations with Israel at this point in time? I was involved with President Carter and Camp David and the peace treaty with Egypt. Since then, we've had, of course, Jordan and peace in 1994, but the Abraham Accords under President Trump were also really quite path-breaking with the UAE and Bahrain, Morocco. What has October 7th, however, and the war done to this process? Do you believe that October 7th and its aftermath in Gaza, for example, has indefinitely delayed Saudi Arabia's decision to normalize relations with Israel? Because if they did, it would really be a game changer.
So the trajectory is a historic trajectory of the inclusion of Israel in the Middle East. And it's also a historic trajectory which started with the bold efforts of Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat of Egypt, under the support and extremely efficient efforts of President Jimmy Carter. Actually, in a letter I wrote to President Carter, congratulating him on his 100th birthday, I mentioned that I'm doing it in gratitude on behalf of the nations of Israel and the Middle East, because he was the first one to groundbreak a historic peace agreement between Israel and Egypt that is only 4 years after a terrible war that took place in October 1973. And here, exactly 50 years later, after the war, exactly almost to the date, another war erupted. but the historical trajectory was clear. Israel is going to be accepted within the families of nations in the Middle East, against all odds. And that's why it was a process. Then came Jordan, and then came the Abraham Accords, and also the peace, I would say the Oslo Accords and the agreements with the Palestinians. It was all together an orchestra of efforts to bring peace to the Middle East. Now, what happened was that you may recall that in the G20 summit, just 2 months before the October war, the last October war, President Biden presented an incredible vision, which I totally concurred with. And the vision was the connectivity between Israel and India through all of the Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia. Clearly, the Gulf states are all partners with us based on the Abraham Accords. And that vision would have been connectivity in telecommunications, in transportation, and in energy, especially solar energy. But it would have connected Europe to the Far East, and it would have connected the United States all the way down to Australia through the Eastern Hemisphere, not the Western Hemisphere. A sea change. And I believe clearly that the October 7th attack was part of a grand plan to derail our inclusion in the region, derail the vision of peace between us and Saudi Arabia. Now, President Biden himself mentioned it in his Thanksgiving address in 2023. So that is where we're at. I think that we can get back on track. Now, after, that we've overcome the immense challenges by the empire of evil of Tehran and its proxies, its main proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. It's not over yet, but clearly the picture is clear that we are getting there. I would say that the day after should include the inclusion of Israel in the region in a very robust way. And I hope and I believe that President Trump's agenda too would move towards this objective, which would be a kind of leading to a historic peace and dialogue between Israel and Saudi Arabia, between Judaism and Islam, Islam and Judaism.
Well, I've been a special advisor to Secretary of State Blinken on Holocaust issues, and I'm at the State Department as part of the time, and I know that this October 7th attack came at a time when Saudi Arabia was in very serious negotiations with the United States and with Israel to normalize relations, and one has to think that Iran and its proxies were trying to disrupt that.
I think that it calls for the alignment of nations, serious nations, a coalition of nations who wants to move the region towards peace. Why does the Middle East have to be a region of wars, battles, and terrible terror? How come we cannot show a different vision to the world? I mean, I have a real dream that the Middle East can be the energy basin for solar energy, meaning something which is climate friendly and accommodating to the entire world through supplies of energy to Europe, Asia, and Africa. It is clearly possible. Israel is there at the heart of it, together with nations who can support and supply. And let me tell you, the Abraham Accords, together with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, Israel together with them is doing many great things together. We're in technology and science, things that can help the world and do good in the universe. That's what we need to seek together.
With Donald Trump's election as president, how do you think this will impact on relations between Jerusalem and Washington?
Well, Donald Trump's first term was an extremely important term of presidency because it impacted the region and Israel. The Abraham Accords are a fantastic achievement. There was, of course, the movement of the American embassy to Jerusalem, which was another historic achievement, and his declarations on the Golan Heights and other efforts that he has done to supporting Israel. So clearly, Israelis remember that and respect that. And I believe that Donald Trump's efforts now, if he moves on his grand plan of bringing positive change in the Middle East, can also impact positively the American economy and American national interests. I've spoken to President-elect Trump on Thursday. We had a very good conversation together, and the predominant item on the agenda was bringing the hostages back home. If we want to move forward and exit from the war, first and foremost, we have to get our sons and daughters back home, not because of geopolitical interests, but first and foremost, because it is our obligation and duty. Otherwise, we will hemorrhage for generations if we don't bring them home, because they are going through hell down there in the dungeons of Gaza. So everyone who can do anything about it should raise his or her voice, should fight as much as possible to bring them back home. And let me say that today, unfortunately, we are marking 401 days since they were taken into terrible captivity.
Well, you may not know, but there is in Washington, almost as we speak, a massive rally in Washington at one of the football stadiums, and it'll probably be 40 or 50,000 people there, which is very heartening. So as you look beyond,
I think my brother's speaking now. Yeah.
yes. So as you look to 2025 and beyond, what do you see as the main threats to Israel's national security, and how should it deal with them?
So I'm differentiating between external threats and internal threats. In terms of external threats, it's not only an Israeli threat, it's a regional threat, and a threat to world stability is Tehran, the Iranian plans, the Iranian the declaration of aiming and working towards the destruction of the only nation state of the Jewish people on earth. But more than that, the only nation on earth which calls for the destruction of another member state of the United Nations. And I think there has to be a major international effort, especially led by the United States, to make sure that Iran does not gain any nuclear capabilities, and also stand up to Iran, because so far we're the ones who've been doing this with our allies when they have attacked us, and we're grateful for that. But it's about time also that we show some more, active steps to block their plans, because we are seeing that they're operating various fronts against us, including from Iraq, with their proxies in Iraq. And we made clear that we won't tolerate any attacks from Iraq, and Iraq will bear the price for that.
So this may come.
We also have a major internal challenge. We have many debates and strifes within our society, like any ordinary, normal democracy. But unfortunately, and I've been putting a lot of weight on that in my agenda, is to prevent a strife within our society that weakens us. And there are many enemies from the outside who want to go into the rift in our society and add oil to the fire in order to weaken our society from within.
And you took a very public role as president in trying to find a compromise on the judicial reform legislation, which has now, I guess, been postponed, but it was quite an effort on your part.
Look, I'll say that the dialogue between the three arms of government is a big issue. It touches upon the crux of what democracy is all about and the balances. And it also has to deal with beliefs of human beings, of how they view society, and I would say the challenge of clashing values, which we are faced with. I wouldn't say that it has dissipated and disappeared. It's there as part of the political debate. But right now, I think that the war and the trauma of October 7th has contained it.
So when you mention Iran, since the withdrawal of the U.S. from the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement of 2015, Iran now has enriched uranium up to 60%, near weapons grade. They have a new generation of centrifuges. They've restored their plutonium plant. And most experts think that they literally are within weeks of being able to break through and have a nuclear capacity. So this challenge may come, President Herzog, sooner rather than later.
Well, I don't want to go into all details, but I think it is clear that it should be one of the items top on the agenda. And the outgoing administration of President Biden, who I will be meeting in 2 days' time, and to express gratitude and thanks for his steadfast support of the state of Israel in the war. And of course, the incoming administration of President Trump will, both of them, it's a big issue on their agenda, and I am sure they will be dealing with it.
Well, let's move to the topic of anti-Semitism. Since the Gaza war, we have seen an unparalleled wave of anti-Jewish hatred in both the U.S. and around the world. Just within the last couple of days, as everyone knows, there was this terrible attack in Amsterdam against Israeli soccer fans. And in the United States, in Washington, D.C., on November 9th, just a few days ago, the anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, in Washington, D.C., in downtown Washington, the major kosher restaurant called Char Bar found that its windows were all shattered. So this is occurring right in our nation's capital, as well as in places like Amsterdam. And then on the Capitol, Jewish students don't feel, and I've talked to many of them, that they can study in peace and safety. And even the Jewish victims of some of the most horrific crimes since the Holocaust have had their concerns belittled and denied. Even before Israel responded, it was already being condemned for defending its own people. So when it comes to Jews, the world seems to lack moral clarity, and certainly also Israel. So how does Israel, as the Jewish state and the Jewish community, move forward? How do we deal with this unprecedented increase in anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism?
So I couldn't agree with you more. A wave of hate was unleashed against the Jewish people worldwide, against Israel, combining, Israel with anti-Semitism and creating a very dangerous cocktail. What we saw on US campuses has been shocking. I've received dozens of delegations of Jewish faculty members from various campuses around the United States, and I was pretty awed because some of them came totally shattered and even fearing to speak until I could tell them, guys, you're at home, relax, say what you went through. And some of them described a situation whereby they could not speak freely and express their support and belief in the state of Israel because it would hurt their promotion in the academic field. They would not be able to publish their articles and books. They were kind of denied the ability to bid for different positions because they were kind of tagged through intersectionality as something of an outcast. It was amazing to me because I'm a graduate of American school system, and I was always admiring the ability of people to have freedom of thought and speech, and I was stunned. And I must say, you see, the age-old disease, the oldest disease of humankind, anti-Semitism, raging again. But we have not to be naive. We have anti-Semitism lurking throughout the ages. It raises its ugly head. And now it is, of course, instigated also by huge machines on the digital sphere. It's supported by Iran and other nations and organizations. And you had, for example, in TikTok, about 160 million new addresses and figures coming up and opening themselves on around October 7th and thereafter. And they're all aimed at sending hate against Israel and the Jews. So, but as opposed to previous eras where we went through dark days, We are now strong. We are capable. We have the tools. In a democracy such as the United States, which is the strongest in the world, you can fight back, you can fight legally, you can fight through your elected officials, you can raise your opinions, you can unite and work hard. And Israel definitely sees it as a top priority to defend all Jews around the world. Amsterdam was also a shocking scene. And today, we have alerts from other countries, and we should fight back as much as possible. And I call upon everybody, including your viewers, to take whatever steps they can and join in this effort.
Well, I think that this is also on the campuses, Mr. President, not just an issue with students, but also with faculty. Let me give you a couple of examples. In Emory, in Atlanta, Georgia, where the synagogue is based, the president, who's Jewish and whose father is a Holocaust survivor with whom I talked, was censured by the faculty senate for having called in the Atlanta police to remove the demonstrators after trying to negotiate with them for several days. At Brandeis itself, my late wife's alma mater, and where I served on the board for a dozen years, just recently, President Leibovitz has
Yes, somebody who I respected.
Yes, and again, the faculty senate censured him. I went to Columbia just before Passover on the second day with my son Brian in New York to see what was actually happening. I saw hundreds of tents on the quadrangle, all identical, all green, all REI tents, and they were disrupting studies from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning with loud horns and drums. And then 170 faculty members at Columbia signed a petition in support of the students and boycotted teaching their last several courses for the last several weeks. So this is a problem not just with students, but also with faculty. And may I say that the Holocaust Museum is being proactive. We are going on TikTok ourselves to reach 13 to 17-year-olds with videos of survivors when they were teenagers, talking about their teenage years. We've contracted with a group called AEN that has 1,000 faculty and administrators to bolster Israeli support on the campuses. So these are some of the concrete things we're trying to do.
So I'm seeing quite a lot of great initiatives all around the United States. Let me say that in some of the campuses you mentioned, there has been a correction, and I know that. I've met university presidents, and actually, to tell you the truth, whenever a university president was strong and tough and clear and brought in the police or did not permit in any way encampments, they were taken off. I also think that there were many efforts done in order for the new academic school year to open and start smoother. And I want to thank also efforts on behalf of federations, organizations, ADL, so many other players in this field, foundations that have done great work in this respect. It is obvious that it goes way beyond simple, disliking or disliking the Jewish people. It is something that runs very deep. And it is no secret that in the woke culture, we've seen elements that undermine the legitimate, natural right of the Jewish people for their own self-determination. And we have to stand up for that. Now, you're correct in saying that people have a short memory or not lack of knowledge of what anti-Semitism can bring. And definitely an issue like Holocaust studies is something that needs to be brought to bear to a young generation, also through TikTok. It requires adaptation. It requires new tools. And I commend you and your colleagues on this. And I encourage that all throughout. There should also be confrontation or confronting the digital platforms, whether it be Meta or whether it be in TikTok or whether it be YouTube and all others. And they all have to be much more cautious when it comes to this issue because of the lessons of what hate can bring and what terrible results it can bring with it. And I recommend a lot of efforts that I hear and read about, or books that have been published, in order for people to delve in and read and use it as material for concrete suggestions on how to deal with anti-Semitism. I recently saw ads that, 30-second ads that were run through in football stadiums, and they were very impressive, and so forth and so on.
Well, I wish we could tell the students how in 2005, Eric Sharon as prime minister withdrew every single IDF soldier and every single of the 7,000 Israeli settlers. There were no Israelis at all in Gaza, and I wish we could tell them about the forthcoming offers that were made by Prime Minister Barak and President Clinton at the second Camp David and by Ehud Barak in 2009.
You're right, because people don't want to study history, and facts don't matter anymore, and a lot of fake news goes there. And you're absolutely right. May I say, God forbid, that people even tend to forget 9/11. Okay? I mean, it's like ignoring major parts in a historical process, in the fact that we've offered so many ideas. Even now, on the issue of the hostages, Israel agreed and offered interim agreements, a few days ceasefire in order to get a few hostages back. The Hamas people turned it down time and time again. I'm saying that because I just saw Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, say it also in TV. And I say to myself, still there will be distortions, but especially by the supporters of Hamas with so many lies, like they're trying to lie about Amsterdam as well. So we have to return, repeat, and stand up again and again and present the right truth.
Let me close with one last question, and that is your vision for Israel and for the Palestinians and for the region. And as you look forward 5-10 years, what do you see with respect to Israel in the region and the Palestinians? And is there a way to resolve the long-standing Palestinian issue?
I will say that first of all, we have to deal with the emotional side of it, which we tend to ignore. There's an enormous amount of pain all around it. And there's a lack of trust, because when, an internationally recognized boundary, a beautiful paradise in the Negev, in the desert, turning blue, many kibbutzim and moshavim and towns and villages of all facets of Israeli life, many of them being the biggest proponents of peace with the Palestinians, many of them helping the people of Gaza, being they themselves being shot, burned, butchered, raped, and abducted. It creates many questions. And by the way, I don't shy away and I don't ignore the pain of innocent Palestinians as well who are suffering from this war. But we have to overcome that by way of something that is serious enough and makes sense enough. And I think that part of it is the movement of the inclusion of Israel in the region, which has to, what we call the day after in Gaza, meaning no more an oppressive regime of terrorists taking over Gaza, but the millions of people of Gaza who are deserving a different leadership and a different regime that will give them hope and enable Jews and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians, to live side by side with each other. Same goes for the Palestinians in the West Bank. Same, exactly that. Meaning we have to hope for a different future by presenting a vision that first and foremost deals with dignity and respect, and understanding that terror is unacceptable under any terms. I presented this vision when I spoke in Congress in the joint session in July 23, 3 months before the terrible war. And I said, at the end, it was terror which undermined all efforts for peace with the Palestinians. the fact that it seems as if legit to take a knife and stab an Israeli couple walking with their kid in a trolley, in the park, or exploding in a bus, or now, as we see, going through the worst of all atrocities, sexual violence of October 7th, an issue that needs to be told and told again and again, and so forth and so on. We have to go overcome that, and we have to speak to each other.
Well, that is very well said, and I think that we're not going to be able to go immediately to a two-state solution, but rather confidence-building measures.
Absolutely. I don't see anybody right now moving as quickly, but we have to work on the day after. On the day after in Gaza can be quite soon, and I hope we will get there. I hope we will have a serious agreement on the Lebanese-Israeli border. I hope it will come out quickly. I know that the administration is working hard. That's also a frontier. We have to get our citizens back home. Their houses are being demolished. Their life is being shattered. We have to move towards the direction of giving the people hope. And I'm sure it can be done.
Last question, and that is, as you look at the rest of your term, what are your major challenges as Israel's 11th president?
My plate is full with challenges, as you can imagine, because we've been discussing them for the last 45 minutes. A top priority of mine is enabling all facets of Israeli society to have a serious internal dialogue of respect and dignity, even if they vehemently dispute each other. And I'm talking to groups and individuals, and of course to the political players. I believe that Israel requires unity in this dire time of challenge. Second, of course, is rebuilding the trust of the Israeli people. I presented the whole agenda to the Knesset just 2 weeks ago in the opening of the Knesset session, winter session, and I outlined a few steps that must be taken in order to regain the trust of the people. Thirdly is defending, protecting, and preserving the unique connection and solidarity with our brothers and sisters, the Jewish people all over the world. And lastly, but that's a major challenge in and of itself, is to bring the message, the just cause of Israel, to the family of nations, to make sure that Israel enjoys its status within the family of nations, not being harassed by international legal institutions who are biased, by anti-Semitic notions by certain leaders, and of course by unfair treatment by certain leaderships and bodies all over the world who are banning Israel and so forth and so on. Meaning, we have a battle to do in our generation as well, and I'm in it at the forefront of it.
But it's also important for the world to know that during, for example, the COVID crisis, Israeli Arabs were many of the frontline workers in the hospitals.
Well, first of all, Israeli Arabs are a very important part of our society. I'm very proud of the Israeli Arab community. It's not in an easy situation. It's not easy under such a terrible year to be both an Israeli and an Arab. It's naturally we understand the complexities, but the Israeli Arab society has mobilized tremendously, and unfortunately also lost sons and daughters, both in the terrible attack of October 7th, and as well as in the military and in the civilian facets of the terror and in the war that ensued. So I'm very proud by that. And if you're already mentioning Israeli Arabs in COVID, let me tell you that I was the first world leader to get the third COVID vaccine, and I insisted that I'll be given it by an Israeli Arab nurse. She was terrific, and I was very proud of her. And that I wanted to send a message to the world that we believe in equality and inclusion of all our citizens.
Thank you for being with us. You honor my late wife and my family. You honor the Jewish people. You're an eloquent spokesman for Israel and for Jews all over the world, and we thank you for sharing your wisdom and your vision with us today.
Thanks a lot, Stu, and may you go from strength to strength. And thank you, all the viewers. Shalom to all.